First of all, thank you all for being here and joining us. This is our first in-person delegate assembly in 2 years because of COVID, and we're glad that you're able to be here. And one of the things we've been talking about while we've been here is certainly the idea that public education is actually a nonpartisan issue. We just did a poll recently, and the poll we did showed whether someone was Democrat, Republican, no party affiliation, they absolutely support public schools and the people who work there overwhelmingly. It was interesting. It was actually, get this, it was 87% of Democrats said they want strong public schools, and 89% of Republicans said they want strong public schools.
Right.
So it really is a nonpartisan issue. Mm-hmm. So why don't we start with a little bit, if you guys can just share your thoughts on how we as an education union and as educators throughout our state can really better advocate for getting our priorities passed in the legislature. So we'll start with Senator Farmer, and then we'll move to Rep. Driskell.
Sure. And Andrew, it doesn't surprise me that you get those kind of numbers conceptually. I talked about it a few minutes ago. You're talking about such a fundamental foundation of our society, education. The devil is in the details and how we get there, obviously. But I think to answer that question, it highlights the importance of FEA and the importance of the joint effort that goes into, and I think it's primarily about educating people, pardon the pun, on some of these details, on things like the funding and things like the inequities that are in the system, and how, I joke with the charter school people now. I tell them, you guys better watch the voucher people. They're taking your cheese. How's it feel? There's so much in the detail, and so many legislators nowadays just push a button that they're told to push. And I think the effort of groups like this to get to know folks, and we did it, I was president, I was in your role of the state trial lawyers a decade ago, and we called it our Key Contact Program. And getting to know legislators in the off season, having that relationship, you all are in your schools, you have kids whose parents are legislators, you're part of soccer teams or church groups or whatever, where legislators are also members. Getting to know them and then establishing that relationship is so valuable, and then just kind of sharing with them your experience and the things that happen, and how maybe you just couldn't get this critical resource because the district didn't have the money or the state didn't fund it. I think those types of efforts help build a consciousness and really, hopefully, some guilt over it, because with so many inequities, ignorance is the real reason for the inequity. And I think the more you all can do to educate people on the nuts and bolts of what is happening and how the bad funding decisions we've made and the lack of attention that we've given to important issues is adversely affecting how our children are being raised and educated, I think that I hope that once you hear those things as a legislator, you will vote differently or push back a little bit on leadership. But it's a systematic problem that we have, not just in education, but in a lot of other areas too.
Yeah. Representative Driskell.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me today. It's such a delight and pleasure to be with all of you. I appreciated that you read the bio and you acknowledged I was born in Winter Haven. I'm a product of Polk County, Florida public schools, so it's great to see you all. My mom taught in public school in Polk County for over 35 years, so grew up in a union household. And of course, shout out to Hillsborough, my people over there. And thank you so much for the award. So to the question at hand, I think it matters what happens both on the field and off the field. When I say on the field, I mean that matters in terms of like what Senator Farmer just referenced in terms of that Key Contact Program. I love the idea of that. And then also, in terms of the representation that you have, FEA, up in Tallahassee, I can't tell you what a great job your team members do making sure that our caucus is educated on the issues, and of course reaching out across the aisle they do, right? Like you make sure that you're making these issues, educating lawmakers in a way to help us understand that these issues are nonpartisan. But then what I mean off the field is you have to look for candidates who reflect your values. And you have to, within your local counties, your local unions, you have to really get behind the candidates who reflect your values. To me, that's the only way that we're going to change the balance of power in Tallahassee and start to be able to push forward the big ideas that we want to see in education.
Thank you both for that. And so let's shift then into one of our main priorities, which is addressing the teacher and staff shortages in the state. You know, the beginning of this year, we had over 5,000 vacancies among teachers in the state of Florida, nearly 4,000 vacancies among our education staff professionals, our bus drivers, cafeteria workers, paraprofessionals, and the like. And we are now 2 months into the school year. And typically, as the school year starts, those numbers go down. But this year, they're actually going up. We now have about 5,100 vacancies among teachers and well over 4,000 vacancies among our education staff professionals. So one of the areas we think has to be addressed is salary increases and equity, because we know that, you know, a couple of years ago it was first-year teachers. There was a big emphasis put on that, but that didn't solve the problem because it left all of our mid-career and veteran teachers out, as well as all of our education staff professionals. So what are your thoughts on what we can do to really bring about some change in salary? There's actually 6 statutes in Florida, plus the budget proviso language, that deals with teacher pay, and there are over 20 regulations within that specifically talk about teacher pay. So what do you see as a way for us to address that, and what advice do you have as we try to advocate for those kinds of changes? So this time I'll start with Representative Driskell, and then we'll come to you, Senator Farmer.
Thank you. So I remember when the governor wanted to raise the starting pay for new teachers, which is admirable. We know that Florida ranks, I think, 49th in teacher pay. And so that was a good move forward, but what we warned against was wage compression, because then you have more senior teachers whose pay had not accelerated at that same rate, so that, you know, that to me can be very, I would imagine, discouraging and demoralizing to the veteran teachers. Then you have all the support staff, then you have all the support professionals who weren't getting raises. And I think there's been a lot in the media that I see about, you know, criticizing workers for not wanting to return to work. But the piece of that that's missing is the conversation that no, employees just want a livable wage. And so people are starting to exercise their personal freedom of choice in trying to find career paths that will pay them. So the solution is that we do have to advocate for more pay. I think part of that should be advocating for an ease in regulation in terms of the categoricals that counties are charged with, or school boards are charged with spending. Because, so in Tallahassee, there's also been just these attacks on local control and home rule, but if we can trust that the professionals on the ground know the best ways to spend their money, then perhaps that could even be a cost-neutral approach. And just a word of caution in terms of this, because you asked what can we advocate for. I've not been in politics that long, but I've been around long enough to know the difference between campaigning and governing. And I want you to watch out for this, because it seems like every time we're coming up on an election year, all of a sudden they want to give teachers bonuses. All of a sudden they start talking about teacher raises, and then people get elected and it's nothing until the next time it's campaign season. Y'all watch that. When I talk about making sure that we elect people who reflect our values, that's from the school board all the way up to the governor's mansion. It matters, and we can't keep getting, I have a colleague, Representative Dottie Joseph out of South Florida. She says in Florida, we get politricked a lot. We do. We get amnesia, and we feel really good when we get that shiny object or that piece of candy or whatever it is they want to give us. But we need them to keep that same energy from the day they get elected all the way through to the next campaign.
Did you just say politricked?
Politricked.
I love that.
Isn't that great?
Write that down, everyone. Politricked. We're going to use that. That's going to be in our political plan.
Rep Joseph, yeah.
I love it.
And I think Rep Joseph learned that or borrowed that from the late, great Larcinia Bullard, I think, might have been the first person who ever used the politricks comment. Rep Driskell, I think, nailed it on all points. During election seasons, we see this rebirth, if you will, of the respect for education, and so often, and I know we're supposed to be talking about bipartisan work here, but so often our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they just engage in bumper sticker politics. And so things like starting salaries or a one-time bonus. See, this is one of the things we fought this last year. Governor wanted to give bonuses. Bonuses are not enduring. Bonuses are not annual, okay? They're not guaranteed. Salaries are.
Right.
So we should be raising salaries for all teachers, especially our most experienced and seasoned teachers who've been on the front lines for so long. And it's so ironic because I've got this group of knuckleheads that I went to high school and college with. There are 7 or 8 of us. If you've ever been to my tailgate stuff at FSU, you've met them. Stephanie's shaking her head. She knows. My buddy's up in Detroit, and he's lamenting that he's waiting in line at the Tim Hortons and can't get his coffee quick enough because they don't have enough employees. And you know, this is what Rep Driskell was alluding to a minute ago. People are smart, and teachers are especially smart. And when you keep lessening or worsening the working conditions and the pay and everything that goes around it, people are going to start finding other jobs. And we can't let that happen when it comes to education. It's one thing to have to wait longer for your cup of coffee. It's quite another thing to not have enough teachers in a school, to have overcrowded classes, to not have the support staff. We talk all the time about the teachers, the support staff, the technical specialists, the cafeteria staff, the bus drivers, everybody. It's all part of that community I talked about earlier. But Andrew, it just comes back to funding. If we fund it, if we would just fund this thing the way we have the ability as the third richest economy in our country, get above that national average. The average is $11,000 per student, and we're at $7,700. Imagine if we were at $11,000 or $12,000 per student, just around that average mark. There'd be so much more in the way of resources and tools that you all need to do the job effectively.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we mentioned briefly about our education staff professionals. Let's talk about them for a minute. About 1/3 of school employees are actually our education staff professionals, not our teachers. And they are often overlooked. People don't always talk about, I mean, now we're hearing a little more about the bus driver shortage, but they don't talk about our maintenance workers and our cafeteria workers and the custodians who keep our schools clean, or our paraprofessionals who work side by side with our teachers, or the people who work in the front office to make sure that all the paperwork's getting done and attendance is taken. And I can go on and on and on of all the people who really support and make our schools run. Yet we're seeing massive shortages with those folks as well, and having a hard time filling those positions. So what are some of your thoughts specifically around making sure we have that support staff system in place, who really do have a huge role in keeping our kids safe, getting them to school, and making sure they're getting the education they deserve? And I'll start with you, Senator Farmer.
Yeah. And unfortunately, people like custodial and maintenance are even more important now because we've so grossly underfunded our capital outlays. We've got schools with leaky roofs, with dilapidated conditions. We're duct taping our way through things in the school system to such a great degree. And Andrew, I'm sorry, it seems glib, it seems simplistic, but you know. I'll reach back into my past and quote in living color, it's more money, more money, more money. I mean, we got to have the resources to operate these things. And what's really galling is, and I'm sorry, you know, charter schools started out as a great idea. They can still be a good thing. I know they are technically public schools, but they get funding, they get these PICO dollars out of the budget that that traditional public schools don't get. Those capital outlay dollars are often used for things like, and moved around to get extra staffing. We've got to return traditional public education to the top of the mountain when it comes to resources and funding. And if we do that, we're going to have all the support staff we need.
Absolutely. Representative Driskell?
I think everything that Senator Farmer said is absolutely on point. And maybe I just add, I think we have to change the way that we talk about support staff. I think that the pandemic taught us a lot about that phrase, frontline workers. And if you think about it, our support staff are on the front lines as well.
Yep.
I mean, I can even think back when I was in elementary school and going through a tough time. You know, my name is unusual. Kids are not always the nicest, whatever. Like, I was just trying to figure it out. Like, Fentrice, what's a Fentrice? I don't know. And there was this wonderful woman on cafeteria staff, and she just made me feel so seen during that time, and so loved and so appreciated. And no, she was not in the classroom, but she was critical to my education experience, right? And like getting me to that emotional state and that just positive mental state where maybe I could receive more of what was being given to me in the classroom. So I think we have to change the language that we use for support staff. I don't know, I'm not the best at naming things, but I think, you know, kind of along the lines of making sure that we understand that our support staff are frontline workers as well. And then Senator Farmer's right, it's all about the money. I think we should change the way we talk about that as well, right? Like it's investment, right? We're investing in our future. We're investing in our public schools. And I think that there's a business case to be made for that, not just in terms of the educated workforce that we want to have in terms of, you know, meeting the demands of the future, but also in terms of the business that we want to attract to Florida. We say that we want high-paying jobs. We say that the tourism economy is great, but we can see that when there's a pandemic or a natural disaster, we're impacted by that. How do we insulate against that? Well, then you want more tech jobs, you want jobs in different sectors. How do you attract those companies and make Florida the place that they want to be? Well, we need to have good public schools. That's part of what these companies look for when they think about where to move.
Absolutely.
So I think shifting the conversation would be a good way to go about it.
Yeah, it's very true. So you know we represent pre-kindergarten through 12th grade teachers and staff. We also represent higher education. And our colleges and universities in Florida, yeah, they're right over there. And our colleges and universities in Florida have seen some challenging language lately, some challenging legislation that's passed over the last couple of sessions. Legislation that really deals with things like performance funding, intellectual freedom, presidential search moving out of the sunshine, things that concern our higher education professors and our graduate assistants there. So can you share some thoughts on what you're hearing might be coming down the pike for higher education this session? And then how do we respond to some of the undermining of our colleges and universities here in Florida, which are often touted as the best in the world, and yet we're seeing folks trying to undermine the great work that our professors and graduate assistants do every day. Yeah,
a couple thoughts on that. You know, and I'm not entirely sure what the legislative priorities are going to be. It's still a little early and they're shaping up. But I'll just comment on what I have observed, which is, what is it? I think it's like a shell game. Or like, you know, things. It's like they're always moving the needle, because first it was preeminence status. You got to get your preeminence status as a university to get this extra pool of money. University of South Florida happens to be in the district that I represent. University of South Florida, Go Bulls, was able to get preeminence status. And then it was, well, it's performance funding. See, you gotta get these performance matrix. That's what we told you. It's like, no, that's not what you said. We heard what you said. You said preeminent. And so they're always moving the goalposts. It's like Lucy with the football is what it feels like. And what I think happens is that the legislature at times has like kind of like pet projects, pet universities that it wants to support. But what I would hope that we could push for, those of us who care about equity in education, is just having a level playing field, making sure that everybody understands the rules, making sure that our public universities and colleges are fully funded to the level that they need to be, make sure that we're looking out for our historically black colleges and universities, which are a critical aspect to making sure that we have a diverse workforce. And then the other thing that I mentioned is with respect to intellectual freedom and diversity. I have been very alarmed by the language in some of the legislation that I've seen come about. It sounds very Orwellian to me, very kind of, you know, monitoring speech. There's a concern that our universities, I think, are too liberal. From what I remember from that time in school, whether it was grade school or even in college, is that you're presented with all different types of ideas, and you kind of have to sort those things out for yourself. That system has seemed to work for hundreds of years. I don't know why we need to change it now. So I think we need to remain vigilant and very careful about what's happening in higher education.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the assault on truth and the assault on objective truth has been disheartening and quite extensive by the right, and I think to a great degree, as Rep. Driskell just mentioned, we're seeing that here. I shared my dad's story a little bit earlier. It was Broward Junior College when he went there. He then went to FAU and went on. And in the time I've been in the legislature, Rep. Driskell is exactly right. We keep, and I was, the phrase moving the goalposts
Right.
was exactly what I was going to say. We give the universities a system or the colleges a system. They work and they develop policy geared towards meeting that system, meeting those standards, that criteria to get the additional funding that they need. And then we change it up. So it's this constant, it's like a hamster on a wheel. You can never really achieve the goal you're supposed to achieve to get the funding that you should be getting in the first place. But in particular, and on the university front, I'm going to come back to that in a second. In particular, the assault on the colleges, I think, has been very mean-spirited and just counterproductive. First of all, we have the best college system in the country here in the state of Florida. That's just not me saying it. You saw me looking through my notes a minute ago. I was trying to find the note for what the accreditation group is that gives the awards. But every year, Florida colleges are in the top 3, and I think we've won like 7 of the last 11 or something like that awards. So shout out to our colleges. You do a great job. My office, my Senate district office, is in the joint FAU Broward College building. And so
Wow.
I love being there. I love being around that education system. But our colleges serve a very different student population base. Our colleges are where people who are looking for a second career or working while also going to school, it's a very different makeup and composition in our colleges than it is at our universities. And to underfund them and do things like, they had to fight to get the word community taken away, and then they wanted to put it back in a couple years ago. I mean, that's just nasty and mean-spirited. Putting caps on the number of 4-year degrees that you can get from a college. There's no mission creep here. It's not like the colleges are sucking students away from the universities. So that's ill-sighted. But then you deal with something like we dealt with last year with the university president search. And they want to remove that incredibly important role and the input that the community and the alumni and the teachers have on who's going to be the next college president. They wanted to take that all out of the sunshine so that they could give it to political cronies and let them get these coveted jobs. And then I just got to say a word about, to what Rep. Driskell said, recruit good candidates. And that goes on both sides of the aisle. Because, and I'm not afraid to talk about it, I was minority leader of the Senate Democratic Caucus for a year. I was supposed to be leader for 2 years. And the issue that precipitated the coup was me going public on some of my members, my Democratic members, wanting to change their vote and allow the university president search to be private and outside of the sunshine.
Wow.
Those are Democrats. So it doesn't matter what party label you're wearing, you still gotta walk the walk and vote the right way and do the right thing. And that's incredibly important when you're recruiting candidates.
Thank you both for your answers on that, because higher education obviously is important, and so many kids struggle to get to that point, and then our professors do an amazing job, and we want to make sure that we continue that. So let's talk about testing for a minute. This is something we've been advocating for a while to end some of this high-stakes testing, and the governor and the commissioner recently came out with eliminating FSA, and we supported that because we also see it as an opportunity, maybe a little crack in the accountability system that has been ironclad and ever increasing and ever changing, moving the goalpost. So we want to see some stuff done with testing as we move forward, not wiping out the accountability system, but certainly getting back to our core mission, which is student learning, and making sure that we're teaching and learning and that we have the time to plan to teach and learn, and that the focus that student data is actually used for the planning and teaching, not for a hammer at the end of the year. So we've had conversations with the commissioner. Yeah, we've had conversations with the commissioner. We are in discussions there, and obviously this is going to come to the legislature. So what is your hope, and what do you think we really need to be aware of as we try to push this envelope? Because we know the Jeb Bush Foundation hasn't liked this conversation, but we think we're on the right track here. What do you see happening here, and what do you think? And I'll start with you, Senator Farmer.
Well, I am encouraged and cautiously optimistic that finally elected officials are starting to hear the cries from teachers and parents on this overemphasis of testing. Again, I spoke earlier about how you learn when you get elected and you learn more details about so many different subject matters. I'll never forget my first meeting down in Broward County with education folks. The number of hours and days that had to be devoted just to teaching to the test. The overemphasis of testing, the overemphasis of objective testing. There are so many other measures out there, and we used all these other measures: attrition, graduation rates, promotion rates. There are so many different measures you can put in place and utilize to have some accountability, because you need accountability. We got to make sure that we're doing our jobs well, and if we're not, we got to figure out why. But this overemphasis on testing has been, I believe, done intentionally. The Bush Foundation did it. Why? What's it all about? It's about privatization of public education. The emphasis of testing, it's done when we were dealing with these, the Corcoran, charter school monolith bill, 7069 a few years ago. He was calling it, he kept saying, we got to do this because we've got these failure factories. Okay? Language like that is so unproductive and so unfair, and it really made my blood boil, because every time he would say it, I would say, you know what, you get what you pay for. and if you're going to set it up like this, you want it to fail. And so that's why all these tests, all these excuses are designed so they can remove even more money from the public education system and give it to charters and to voucher schools. And the voucher schools are the worst, because they've got absolutely no accountability. That whether it's testing or anything else, they don't have to prove that they're doing a good job at all. And these schools get set up for one purpose and one purpose only: to suck that money out. And then they may close in the middle of the school year, and they don't have to give the money back. And that's money that didn't go into the enrollment data that determines the school district's funding. So it's a vicious cycle here. But I am happy that so many professionals now have finally been heard about this emphasis on testing. Just this week, the NCAA panel released its study on athletic scholarships, and they have recommended that they do away with the SAT, ACT minimum score that was required to get a scholarship. It's just a little piece of the puzzle, but it again shows a recognition that over-reliance on objective test results is unfair to so many students. I've got a daughter, special needs daughter, learning disabilities. She doesn't do well on objective multi-choice tests. You give her a little bit extra time and maybe change the testing format. She's in her 4th year at Lynn University. She's been on the president's list, all 4 years that she's been there. Right. They say this could not happen. It does. We just got to change the way we're measuring our students.
Awesome. Representative Driskell.
Thank you. I think Senator Farmer's words are right? Like, cautiously optimistic. You know, I mentioned earlier that my mom taught public school for over 35 years, and over the course of her career, I watched as the joy was taken out of teaching. I got to sometimes kind of hang out with her and tag along with her and her teacher friends, and I would listen to their conversations, and the joy was absolutely being taken out of teaching. I have a sister who's in the public education system over in Polk County, and she worked, I know, and she worked reading. She was teaching reading, and now she's a reading specialist, and I hear from her about how she's been trained to know what a kid needs best. She's been trained to recognize that this kid might need me to modify the way that I approach trying to teach this concept. But the testing just makes it so difficult to break away and to really tailor education to kids. You know, to use a sports analogy, coaches coach to the talent that they have. Let's let our teachers teach to the talent that they have and teach in a way that is best for our students. I think that it will be critical because this could change the way we teach in Florida for a generation. So it is critical for FEA to be a part of these conversations, because a lot of the times what's happening is that people are making these decisions. These committee chairs have never taught in a classroom a day in their lives. They don't know what the heck is going on. So we need to make sure that we're hearing from the educational professionals, because this is going to be a huge difference. And just to your point about the SAT and ACT, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because it has been, I think, one of those barriers in terms of having greater diversity in our colleges and universities. So part of my bio is that with my public education from Polk County is that I was able to go to Harvard for college. I had classmates, and it was particularly my classmates who also were fellow minorities, who did not do great on the SAT or the ACT. But when you look at where their careers are now, when you look at what they've been able to do with the opportunity that you give them, you give a kid an opportunity, they're gonna make the most of it. We've gotta do the same for our kids here in Florida and recognize that testing is only one measure, and it's an imperfect measure, and it's not really a predictor for future success. So I'm glad to see this. But we need FEA a part of the conversation, or they're going to mess it up. I'll be real. They're going to mess it up.
Well, we intend to be part of the conversation. But with that, I'm going to start with you on this question, and then we're going to do two more questions here. But Representative Driskell, last year and the last couple of years, we've seen bills aimed at taking away the freedom of our members to come together to advocate for their students and their profession. We've been successful, obviously, in stopping that, but it's put us on defense a lot.
Yeah.
These bills we hear may come back. We're hoping they don't go very far, and that's what we're working towards. But what advice do you have for us to really make sure that our freedoms, our rights to be able to advocate for kids are not undermined?
Right. And I know I keep going back to my mom's story, but I remember maybe I was in 5th grade or so, and the legislature was doing something that was eroding collective bargaining rights. And even as a kid, that did not seem fair to me. If you've got the government, right, like you've got all this power coming against you, what are they so afraid of? For the employees, for the workers, for the teachers to organize and to present their positions in a well thought out way. So you need to be vigilant. We have to be vigilant. You need to do everything that you can. I know the legislature is making it hard, but do everything that you can to strengthen your numbers, because what happens is that when you have that much power and there's less opportunity for accountability, the barriers are significantly lowered in terms of them just being able to accomplish the policy goals that they want to. So we have to be accountable. We have to be vigilant. I know that they are always threatening to end FRS or to change the retirement system in dramatic ways. Our retirement system is healthy. We've got one of the best retirement systems and healthiest in the country. So do not believe the hype when you hear that. Look for your own information on that. There's a think tank here in Florida called the Florida Policy Institute. They do a lot of research on tax issues and economic policy issues. And recently, my caucus and I heard a presentation from them and they walked us through the numbers about just how healthy our system is. So watch that. Watch how they're going to try to pit unions against one another. They tried that last year, I think, with the firefighters and maybe the police, like trying to take them out, omit them from some legislation. And they are also very important frontline workers. But what I'm trying to suggest is that we're all in this together. So I think you have to be vigilant, because if we lose your voice, we lose a critical aspect of accountability in the legislative process.
And I'm very, very glad you mentioned making sure that that FEA partners with the other union groups, and I know you do. This is a collective fight. They want to, I talked about it earlier, they want to get rid of unions, because you all bring whatever measure of fairness and equity we have in this system to bear. And this past session, we didn't have many victories. My staff gets mad at me when I say we, because I vote against all this stuff. But the legislature passed some pretty bad legislation, election laws, a protest bill. You go on and on and on. Two of the small victories we had were fighting off the union membership bill and the FRS bill. And you touched on it. We have arguably the strongest retirement fund in not just the country, one of the strongest in the world. Our retirement fund is so respected around the world, and we've made this social compact. You all have chosen to go into the teaching profession. You could have gone into the corporate world and maybe made more money over the course of your career, but we gave you protection on the back end. In your pensions and your retirement benefits. That's a promise we made to you all, and it's a good promise, and we need to stand by that promise, and we can't weaken this system so that it makes it harder to recruit new teachers going forward, back to your question about the shortage. And the other thing I'll say is, and it sounds like Andrew did his homework and just got us to come up here and promote FEA and membership as being so important. But it's so important, and it's that we were able to fight back those bills because FEA and AFL-CIO and United Faculty of Florida were in the Civic Center in droves by the dozens, cards turned in, ready to testify on these bills. And they had an agenda, and they had to get through some of their other hateful legislation, and so they had to decide, and that's how it happened. And so don't think, I know it gets really hard and can be frustrating, and you feel like you got bruises on your forehead from banging it against that wall so often, but I say it all the time, democracy thrives with participation, and it suffers with indifference. And so we need you to keep doing what you're doing. Be there. Be that thorn in their side. Be that Jiminy Cricket on their shoulder. Keep reminding our fellow elected officials the importance of what you do, the details of what you do, and why a lot of times that bill that they're talking about is really stupid, harmful policy that's going to harm education in the state of Florida. You got to keep doing that.
Yeah,
awesome.
You're here.
Awesome. So we're running to the end of our time here, and what I would like for you guys to do is just share anything you think it's important for our delegates to know about the process and about the work that they can do, and really what you see coming down the pike for public education this legislative session, or what your hopes are for public education this legislative session. So I'm going to start with Senator Farmer, and then we'll end with Representative Driskell.
Yeah, Andrew, I think I've touched on a lot of it throughout our discussion today, and this has been really fun. I like the format. It's a great, I joked around, it's like the Dick Cavett show up here. We're sitting around. Some of you remember Dick Cavett. The others, are younger ones, will ask some of the more seasoned ones. I'm an old soul. Don't let these boyish looks fool you. I've been around. No, it's been so frustrating, and capitalism finds money, right? That's what capitalism is about. Capitalism discovered the healthcare system 100 years ago. And now private companies dominate the healthcare system, and we've got so many unnecessary layers and insurance industry and hospitalists and all this stuff, and it's the whole thing's been privatized. That bucket started getting used up, so now capitalism turned and said, well, wait, where's the next set of money? Well, in every budget, healthcare is one, education is two. And so now capitalism has turned its eyes towards education. And that is the reality of what is going on here. And listen, capitalism is a great part of America, American dream. We all want to do well. That's fine and great. But when you're talking about a fundamental societal obligation of educating your children and wanting to provide that American dream and the goal that your kids do better than you, right? That was always the goal. We've gotten to a point where that's really in danger. And I've said it several times today, y'all are just so critically important to keeping this the greatest country in the world. We have constitutionally mandated in the state of Florida that we have a safe, healthy, and fully funded education system. We had challenges on the safe and healthy during COVID. You all have risen to the occasion. Rep. Driskell nailed it earlier. You are frontline workers, just like those nurses, just like those first responders. You all are frontline workers, absolutely. And you went over and above during this pandemic, and you continue to do so, and our school boards continue to battle these craven policies and attitudes of our governor and our education chair, and you just got to keep doing it. You got to keep doing it because it's just too important. We can't do it without you as part of the fight. And as I said, I can only believe that what we do matters and what you do matters, and being there, and I talked earlier about it, having those relationships with legislators from your school, from your church group, whatever, that's so important, because then fast forward to when we're in session and things are flying 1,000 miles an hour, and there are like 3,000 bills filed every year and another 3,000 amendments, and we got stuff coming at us at rapid pace. I'm not looking for pity, but the reality is when a friend walks into our office, somebody from our community, from our school, from our church group, and says, hey, I really need to talk to you, this bill, I don't know if you've heard, but this, and this, so here's what it would do to teachers in our schools, to the education system, to our children. That matters, because now we know you, we can trust you. And so all these efforts, as I said, sometimes they get frustrating, but at the end of the day, we do continue to hold our own and win, and we can only do that with the help of you. Too many of our colleagues forget that we work for you. It's not the other way around.
That's right.
And so please keep doing what you're doing. President, you've done a great job. Your staff is incredible. Your legislative team in Tallahassee, they educate us, they inform us, they give us the tools we need to be the advocates we want to be, to fight for you all and the public education system, and we'll continue to do that. It's a partnership all the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Farmer.
Well said.
Representative
Thank
Driskell?
you. So many thoughts. In terms of what we can anticipate, I think Senator Farmer hit on that. It's anytime there's the opportunity to privatize just a little bit more, the legislature is going to go for it. So we have to make sure that we stay well prepared for that, and the advocates in Tallahassee that FEA has always make sure that we are educated and well prepared to push back. In terms of what I would like to see, it's like how much time you got. What I would like to see is, I would like to see the legislature meet its constitutional obligation to have a uniform system of high quality schools that is adequately funded. One of the pieces of legislation that I filed, in fact, it's the only bill that I've filed so far, and it goes back and forth. Apparently, sometimes a Republican might file it, sometimes a Democrat might file it. It's definitely our time to be championing this, is pushing for the election of our education commissioner once again, because there is absolutely zero accountability in that position right now. We have seen an education commissioner, our current education commissioner, politicize education and the safety of our students and our teachers and support staff in a way that to me is just so unfair and so unhealthy. All Floridians deserve the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. That's what it's about, right? And so pushing for that accountability is something that I would love to see. But I know we're short on time. There's this timer here that tells me we've got 52, 51, 50 seconds, so I'll be fast. And I guess just my parting words would be just to encourage you, do not get weary in well-doing. I know what that's like, where you're always working so hard, you're doing the right things, you're working in your classrooms or on your school bus or in the cafeteria, and nobody sees the million tiny things that you do every day to make that place work, to make education work for our kids. But we see you, we appreciate you, you are valued. Our caucuses are in the minority, but with you, we have more leverage. With you, we have a majority. It is the overwhelming majority of Floridians who want us to have high quality schools, right? So we need to use that. Don't get weary in well-doing. Keep up the good fight. We appreciate you. We need you. Thank you so much for this conversation today. Really appreciate it.
Senator Farmer, Representative Driskell, we really appreciate you taking time out of a Saturday away from your family and other obligations to spend some time with the educators in the state of Florida. And so thank you so much for the fight and the work that you do in the legislature on a daily basis. And you know, they talked about the FEA, PPA staff a lot because our staff is amazing and making sure that we have the relationships with you all, and you guys are great to work with. And so we really appreciate it. It's why you both have gotten awards from us, because we really do appreciate what you do on our behalf.